Welcome to Window Dressing. This week, I begin with what will be a short jaunt into Gothic Romance and Gothic Revival films. The term Gothic in this context is not about the literal Goths, but a style of writing that eventually morphs into what we would think of as soap operas today, but with a dark or psychologically murky twist that is worthy of Hitchcock. The time period in question is primarily the mid-1800s to early 1900s, but just as fashions from the 1920s heavily influenced the 1960s, the 1800s' interest in ghostly haunts and romantic hysteria came back into fashion in the early 1940s. All of the films I will be talking about, except for the new adaptation of Wuthering Heights coming out on Valentine's Day 2026, were made in the late 1930s to mid-1940s. Speaking of Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, written in 1847, I will be talking about the most significant and my favorite film adaptation of that story this week. The 1939 Wuthering Heights, directed by William Wyler. The film stars Merle Oberon as Cathy and Lawrence Olivier as Heathcliff. It opens on a winter storm that drives the new tenant of Thrushcross Grange to Wuthering Heights, Heathcliff's house. He owns both the Heights and the Grange. The latter was once the family home of his wife, Isabella, played by Geraldine Fitzgerald, and Catherine, Cathy, who married Isabella's brother, Edgar Linton, played by David Niven. The love story is not between Catherine and her husband, or Heathcliff and his wife. It is between Cathy and Heathcliff, who were raised like siblings but developed a love of a much more affecting type than familial. It was fated. Cruelty and care color their hearts and the very atmosphere of the moors that Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights are situated upon. The look of the English moors was recreated and filmed atop the rolling hills of Thousand Oaks, California. For those of you who do not live in Southern California, Thousand Oaks is just north of LA County in Ventura County, very near Calabasas and at the valley end of North Malibu. I typically make it less than 8 minutes into the film before I begin to cry. That particular moment is when Heathcliff runs into Cathy's old room and screams for her ghost to come in. He cries for her as she whispers his name in the wind. There is nothing more romantic than dying at the hands of love and then haunting that hand until the end of time. I suspect that the 2026 adaptation will lean heavily on the more masochistic tropes of Gothic romance. I, for one, am ready for that. I think it's a key component to love with devastating effect. The consequences of it are just that. Devastating. The haunting of Heathcliff by Cathy's ghost is unnerving because of the active self-harm, cruelty, and suffering that are inherent in their love story. And it is love. Cathy and Heathcliff could never suffer under the weight of an accusation of apathy. Leave the fear of God and the devil to those whose desire is not as strong as Heathcliff and Cathy's. There is one key indicator of Cathy's character and a great equalizing factor between her and Heathcliff that is mentioned early on in the film and book. Her father has gone to Liverpool and promised to bring both of his children back a gift of their choosing. Cathy's brother requested a violin, perhaps predicting his future in furtive self-pity. But Cathy requests a whip. The film softens the description and opts for the term riding crop. Cathy grows to delight in her role as mistress, and Heathcliff as her grateful servant. Great love requires a man to make himself small, and Heathcliff sees Cathy as a queen. He is more than willing to bow to her. His willingness to shrink is what makes him large. She receives, in addition to her whip, a lifetime of hopeless romance that day, for her father also brought back a street urchin with a dirtied face and a true heart, Heathcliff. While mercilessly teased and mistreated by Cathy's brother Hindley, Heathcliff retains his dignity through the mutual love that grows between him and Cathy. They have their own games, their own language, and their own special place on the moors, at Penistone Crag, a rock formation that represents their pretend castle. They steal off to this preordained locale of love every chance they get. On one particular occasion, when they are still children, Heathcliff is physically hurt by Hindley. Heathcliff swears his revenge and deepens his resolve to love Cathy and hate Hindley. Heathcliff's vindictive passion is his whip, and ultimately it makes a beggar out of them both. Cathy tells Heathcliff that he is of noble birth, and that he only needs to go out into the world and claim that birthright. In the book, this line comes from the governess, Ellen, but it is quite effective from Cathy's mouth in the film. She loves and hates him for doing so too late and at all, but I'll circle back to that. Their father dies, leaving Hindley in charge and Heathcliff to wither under his new master's reign. Cathy grows into a young lady, while Heathcliff gets surlier and dirtier by the day. But they continue to meet on the moors and dream about a growing distance bridged when he is her king and she is his queen. Cathy, plainly dressed in a short-sleeved prairie dress and black hair with soft features, a clean face, and wild eyes, says to him, "Why aren't you a man? Why can't you rescue me, Heathcliff?" Why indeed has he not rescued her? After all, she too lives at the heights with her tyrant of a brother. But Heathcliff is strong. His heart, his bravery, his guts. She hears the sound of merry music coming from the Grange, the Linton home, that lies 4 miles from Wuthering Heights. She runs to see. He follows reluctantly, like her loyal pet, one that does her no real good. The pair creep into the white rose-adorned garden of the Linton house to have a peek inside at the merriment. Destined to be a voyeur rather than a participant in societal joys, Heathcliff is at ease, while Cathy has come home to a world in which she quite comfortably fits. He watches her watch them and gets a glimpse at yet another piece of her heart he cannot attain. The tragedy is not like a car crash in which you are called to look, but like the death of a beloved pet in which you must look away. There is a shame to Heathcliff's failures that will later make his love intolerably strong, yet impossible to live without. A guard dog catches sight of the 2 interlopers and fixes its jaw to Cathy's leg. Unable to prevent the damage already done, Heathcliff sacrifices himself to the dog to make up for his initial inability to protect young Cathy. The Lintons realize the severity of the injury and carry Cathy inside. They immediately turn to Heathcliff and push him out of the house, but not before Cathy requests that he not only leave the Grange, but leave the Heights and, quote, bring her back the world. She allows him one last chance to win her heart, a heart that, unbeknownst to her, he has already stolen and keeps captive. Cathy recovers at Thrushcross Grange for a long period, returning to Wuthering Heights in high spirits and donning fancy dress. She arrives home with Edgar Linton as her chaperone, wearing a lush and gorgeous day dress with a matching overcoat trimmed in velvet and topped with a lace bow at her neck. She wears a velvet bonnet trimmed with white ruches and a matching muff that elevates the look from lovely to lady. When she comes home, she's shocked to find that Heathcliff is still there. He left for a brief time, but being unable to go without his dear Cathy, or so was his claim, he returned. Cathy is crushed at the disappointment that her king is still a pauper. She also finds that her chaperone takes the opportunity to admonish her for allowing Heathcliff the run of the house. So one is a bully and the other a wretch. She yells at Linton, telling him he cannot talk about Heathcliff like that, and she lets it slip that she loves him. He assumes it is the love of a pet and not a man. Of course, he is wrong. She runs to her room and angrily sees the reflection of the lady she is dressed as. The finery supplied by the Lintons does little to warm her heart now. She strips to her petticoat and violently tears the clothes, marking the beginning of the war between her head and her heart. She runs to the moors where Heathcliff awaits her. They embrace before the battle inside Cathy has determined their fate. The fight is to the death. But the moors are filled with the sweet scent of heather, and she runs into the flowering mountainside like a child. He follows her, and both are as free as they ever will be. The deterioration of their love accompanies the growth of her worldly desires. Her grown-up self cannot stand the indignities Heathcliff so proudly suffers and refuses to budge from. Just as she wants to be rescued, wants to be free, he only knows how to be captive to her. This lesson in love twists into teaching him how to become a captor himself. But not before fresh humiliations and untruths tear them further from peace. Catherine is getting ready to go to the ball at the Linton household. She is dressed in finery from head to foot, with her hair done in barrel curls with 2 black bows on either side of her lovely face. She greedily lavishes the perfume Linton sent to her on her neck as she fusses about in her full-skirted gown covered with fancy frills. One of my favorite details of the outfit is the 2 bejeweled bracelets that are much like a velvet choker, which she wears around both of her wrists. Her neck remains bare and becoming. Just as diamonds are more appropriate for older women, so is the wisdom in not covering up a youthful décolletage. And those 2 bows in her hair really make her look like a schoolgirl slut in the best possible sense of the phrase. Heathcliff enters Cathy's room, and she lets him stay, gathering joy at his jealousy and annoyance at his failure to reach the heights of her fanciful version of Edgar Linton. She pushes Heathcliff with the hope that he will succeed in winning her hand, but knowing he doesn't have the confidence for such an achievement. She calls him dirty. He slaps her face, and he, in his shame, declares, "It doesn't help to strike you." His hands are indeed dirty from hitting his lovely Cathy, and he uses them to break glass as penance for his crime. Punishment becomes the hallmark of their increasingly sacrificial heavy romance. The proof of true love is a steep price, but worth every penny paid. The people who lose aren't always the wise and willing participants that the primary lovers are, although even their participation seems to be preordained by some cruel tide it is without use to fight against. Case in point, after Heathcliff and Cathy's row, she comes home from her date with Edgar Linton, bragging that he proposed to her maid Ellen. In the same speech, when pressed about Heathcliff's place in Cathy's heart, she replies, "It would degrade me to marry him." Upon hearing this, he leaves Wuthering Heights to make his fortune and prove himself worthy of her hand. He did not stay to hear the end of her confession. When she tells Ellen that Heathcliff is more herself than she is, Cathy says, "Whatever our souls are made of, his and I's are the same." Cathy climbs up to the moors in the pouring rain, sobbing for her king, for her Heathcliff, to come and rescue her. But he is already gone, and after a brief illness where Edgar takes care of her, her head wins out against her heart, or in this case, her soul. Not knowing or caring much at this point if her abandoner will return, she marries Edgar Linton, who makes her a happy husband. They are content in their home at Thrushcross Grange, living with each other and Isabella, Edgar's sister and Cathy's fast friend. The fairy tale storyline of the misheard missive, the separation, and then the fallen hero's quest serves the story well because it all but promises a happy ending to a story that only proves love is real by breaking everyone's heart. One domestic bliss-colored evening at the Grange, Cathy is working on her needlepoint. Isabella attempts to play the piano, and Edgar is playing chess with the butler. Alan interrupts this semi-peaceful domesticity to announce a visitor. The visitor is not a stranger that darkens their door. It is Heathcliff, come for his Cathy. He is no longer the pauper of the countryside stable, but a newly made man by way of America. We never learn the source of his wealth, but it's all the better because it only exists to prove to Cathy that he matters. It doesn't actually matter at all otherwise. In addition to acquiring wealth, he has also grabbed up the ownership of Wuthering Heights through the calculated purchase of Catherine's brother's gambling debts. The Heights will now be his home, or rather he has returned home and put the deed to it in its rightful hands. Because the perceived greed in his actions, he is not received well initially at the Linton household. Cathy is especially struck by his presence and seems to freeze, accepting the tears in her eyes when he congratulates her on her marriage. The one member of the family that is overly eager to jump to his defense is Isabella, who after his departure declares his brother and Catherine's behavior shameful. It is no wonder that he has caught the eye of the bored and budding young Isabella, but his eye is only on Lady Catherine. In the book, Lady Isabella's interest in Master Heathcliff is much more fraught with foolishness and humiliation, the heights of which are what make me suspect an entirely different read of this relationship in the upcoming adaptation. One that is more akin to dungeon sex fueled by deep jealousy as opposed to simple neglect born of naivety. But naive or not, Isabella shows up at Heathcliff's door soon after his intrusion into the Linton household. She lies and says her horse has gone lame, and with very little effort, Heathcliff has her for more than a loyal friend. He is invited as her guest to a dance at Thrushcross Grange, one in which his neglect of Isabella and eyes for Cathy become too apparent for even Isabella to ignore. Cathy is all grown up and wearing diamonds around her delicate décolletage now. Diamonds that Isabella also dons on her hardly aged neckline, signaling a lack of wildness from birth, whereas Cathy's breeding is worn like a dress, easily removed to reveal her true nature. She and Heathcliff walk out to the balcony and talk. Cathy says, "I am another man's wife, and he loves me, and I love him." Heathcliff says, "If he loved you with all the part of his soul for a whole lifetime, he couldn't love you as I do in a single day. Not he, not the world, not even you, Cathy, can come between us." She says, "Heathcliff, you must go away. You must leave this house and never come back to it. I never want to see your face again or listen to your voice again as long as I live." Heathcliff says, "You lie. Why do you think I'm here tonight? Because you willed it. You willed me here across the sea." Cathy walks away from him without another word or glance. Isabella is the one who runs to him, naively and without respect for the fire that burns before her. She becomes a convenient tool of revenge for him to wield like a weapon, the flames of desire that were not quelled by the ocean he crossed for Cathy. Isabella floats about her bedroom. A gorgeous Drendel bed and Gothic mantle make the backdrop of her falsified bliss. Her nightdress is lushly layered and ruffled, and her hair falls down wild and loose around her neck. She is taken with the spirit of love, and seems as soft as a white lamb's fur before it is matted with blood. Cathy comes in fully possessed and powerful. Her presence dismantles the perceived beauty in Isabella's sweetness. She has come to warn her against, quote, throwing herself at Heathcliff the way she witnessed that night. She says that any interest he has in Isabella is a tool to injure Cathy. Isabella returns the gash by describing the affections Heathcliff has given her, namely, a declaration of love and passionate kisses. The self-possession of Cathy gives way to powerful rage, the kind that burns with the fire of love and the inability to suffer indignity. Whereas Isabella's demeanor is that of a stupid girl whose value has increased with the interest of a man whom she implicitly believes above her sister. The last point illustrates her lamb to the slaughter state and the quote-unquote moral character she seems to derive from it. But where else is she supposed to go but to the slaughter when faced with the torture of being told he doesn't really love her? She makes Cathy the villain by reframing her as the slaughterer. She says, "Do you imagine, Catherine, that I don't know why you're acting so? Because you love him." Cathy slaps her hard in response to this and keeps on hitting her. Isabella finishes her diatribe with the following accusations. "You don't want him to be happy. You want him to suffer. You want to destroy him. But I want to make him happy, and I will. I will." This idea that love is somehow about making a man happy, or that it is a high calling to save a man from the grips of a woman who is rightly angry at him for never stepping up but coming back too late, is odd to me at best. At worst, it's a perversion of faith that steals two women's souls. That perversion is furthered by Heathcliff's will to ruin Cathy the way he perceives she has ruined him. When Cathy finds out about their marriage, she sobs in velvet and fur on her stairs with her husband, and he can clearly see that she loves Heathcliff. She falls to his feet and sobs in the most honest act that any of the lot of them has made in years. Admitting the truth doesn't always set us free, though. She in fact gets quite ill in response to her acknowledgement of her pain. Heathcliff has begun to take out the consequences of his own actions on Isabella, who soon finds out how empty the results are of sacrificing yourself for a man's happiness. She begs Heathcliff for the opportunity to make him happy, but all he can say is, "Why isn't there the smell of heather in your hair?" Isabella will never be Cathy. When Heathcliff finds out that Cathy is dying of the broken heart that he wrought with the blood of Isabella, the same broken heart he has survived not through hope, but through revenge, he goes to her bedside. It's on Cathy's deathbed that the most important and potent things of her life happen. She asks her husband to go get her heather, which she will put in her hair. Heathcliff comes in his absence. This isn't exactly the circumstances in the book, but it is far simpler and opportunely timed for the screen. When Heathcliff comes into her room, Cathy lies on her four-poster bed, wearing a high-necked white cotton nightgown with her curly hair down and lying neatly on either side of her face, parted in the middle, prominently displaying her widow's peak. Her eyes sparkle boldly, like that of a child when she sees Heathcliff in her room. She calls him closer to her. He is humbled by the sight of her. She asks him how many years he means to live after she is gone. They embrace and they kiss, as if pulled together by the strongest force in heaven or on earth. He says he is strong enough to bring them both back to life should she want to live. She says, "Heathcliff, I want to die." He buries his head in her chest and cries. She has a look of wholeness when he finally stops fighting on behalf of his pride and succumbs to her and their ill-fated but very real love. But his will, the same urge to fight that has put her here, climbs up inside him and declares his tears worthless. He says, "My tears don't love you, Cathy. They blight and curse and damn you." She says, "Don't break my heart." He responds, "Oh, Cathy, I never broke your heart. You broke it." He continues with his blame and damnation. She cries. They kiss. He knows he cannot win. He can only hold her and carry her to the window to see the moors, their kingdom, one last time. She dies in his arms. He is the last man to ever hold her. She is the only woman he should have ever let love him. His realization for his part and his desperation form a curse on her body. He says, "Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I live on. I killed you. Haunt me then. Haunt your murderer. I know that ghosts have wandered on the earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this dark alone where I cannot find you. I cannot live without my life. I cannot die without my soul." Drive me mad is the tagline of the new adaptation, and it makes sense because it is the most pulsating part of their love. The crazy and unending love that served no one's happiness, but is still the very definition of romance. It doesn't escape me that the one who died as a result of it is her. But Heathcliff is indeed haunted by her in the most fantastic proof of punishment I have ever witnessed in a story or on screen. It, in that way, does serve a sense of justice that isn't innate in all love, but is in theirs. They both paid a high price that ended up being equal as anything can be in any era between a man and a woman. Thank you for listening to Window Dressing's first Gothic Romance episode. The next episode will be a deep dive into the 1944 film Gaslight, a now commonly understood phrase tied to coercive control and the general hystericization of women in modern relationships. Although, as of late, the term has been co-opted by psych-term-savvy men who are using it to give credit to the patriarchy's fight back against violence against women being recognized as a legitimate problem. The so-called mutual abuse argument does not hold water when the history of hysteria and the statistics of domestic abuse are given any weight. I look forward to low lighting and corset-bound redemption next time on Window Dressing. Please like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening and follow me on Instagram at Window Dressing Podcast for more content. I'm Madeline Jane Auble.